Hi, Elena. I'll make you a presenter.
Yes, hello.
Hi.
Hello, colleagues. Hello, how are you?
Hi, Elena.
So exciting to see you coming. Let's see. Hi, Yongi.
Hi.
Minutes. Hi, Solomon. Would you like to try speak and see whether your mic works?
Hi, can you hear me?
Okay, yes. Sounds good. Perfect.
Perfect.
Hi, Howie. Should we give up 2 more minutes for more people to join, and then we can start? So we start at 9:02.
Yes, sounds good. Hi, Chris.
Hi, Chris.
Hi, everyone hear me okay?
Yeah.
Hi, Chris.
Hello.
Chris, is it 6 a.m. for you?
It is, but this is my normal working hours. If you're going to do Africa from the West Coast, 6 a.m. to 3 a.m. is 3 p.m. is my typical day.
Well, good morning, sir.
Hi, Christopher.
Hi, Sepson, how are you?
Good to see you.
You as well.
Hello, Youngie.
Hi, Samson and Christoph. Should we start, Howie? Okay.
Liliana, what do you think? Where's my starting slide? Okay.
Yes, I think we can start.
Okay.
Oh, Omar is joining. Okay.
Yeah. So you have a starting slide, Howie?
Here. Yes. Did you see it? No? Oh,
No.
sorry.
Okay.
It's just okay, I'll turn off my mic.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you. Now I see it. So, dear colleagues, thank you very much for attending this side event on Your Voice Matter, contributing to the Copenhagen Framework on Citizen Data and its implementation. So my name is Yong Min, and I'm the Chief of SDG Monitoring Section at the UN Statistical Division. So we're very glad you come to this side event and showing your passion to the citizen data work. So as we gripped with multi-faced challenges like achieving the SDGs, combating climate change, and ensure universal access to vital services like healthcare and education, the demand for reliable data in policy making and informing the general public has reached unprecedented levels. While official statistics play a critical role in decision making and public debate, traditional data sources such as survey and census are facing many challenges, as we all know, including the declining response rates, the rising costs, and the timeliness issues. This creates critical data gaps, particularly for marginalized communities and vulnerable population groups whose voices often go unheard. So the Global SDG report has further highlighted the significant issue of data gaps in SDG monitoring, presenting a formidable obstacle to achieving the 2030 agenda, particularly in fulfilling the pledge of leaving no one behind. So these data challenges underscore the need for innovative data solutions and new data partnerships. The insight derived from the lived experiences and perspectives of citizens are indispensable in decision making. So citizen contribution to data in multiple processes throughout data value chain are increasingly recognized as critical to overcome many of the data challenges we face today. Citizen data are being used or experimented around the world. Citizen participation throughout the data lifecycle not only fills data gaps but also fosters inclusivity, fairness, and strengthens accountability and transparency, making data a powerful tool for decision making. So recognizing the immense potential of citizen data, the official statistical community has started working with partners in this area. So back in November 2022, the UN Statistical Division organized the first UN expert group meeting on harnessed data by citizens in Bangkok. At the meeting, it was agreed that developing a conceptual framework would be an important next step to help conceptualize the different ways citizens contribute to data and support the formulation of action points for the community to move forward. The meeting also agreed to establish a collaborative as a platform for collaboration and exchange of experience and to advance the work in this area. At the 54th session of the UN Statistical Commission in March last year, the usefulness of citizen data to fill data gap was recognized by the official statistical community. The UN Statistical Commission supported our work on citizen data and stressed the need to develop a conceptual framework. At the UN World Data Forum in April 2023, the UN Secretary General also praised and welcomed the citizen data initiative. And at the forum, the collaborative on citizen data was launched. In September 2023 in Copenhagen, we all organized the second UN expert group on citizen data. As a follow-up to the meeting, a first draft of the Copenhagen framework on citizen data has been developed. So I would like to take the opportunity to thank our partners, collaborative steering committee members, and experts from civil society organizations, human rights institutes, academia, and other regional and international organizations who have provided important input to the draft of the framework and also contribute to our joint initiative on citizen data. So you will hear some of them sharing their experience and views at this event. So the draft framework is currently available as a background document for the upcoming 50th session of the Young Statistical Commission. To prepare for the discussion on the framework as a commission, this side event will foster exchange and solicit feedback on the Copenhagen framework and the roadmap for its implementation. And also share experiences of the production and use of citizen data for policy and impact. And lastly, also expand the outreach of the framework and gather interest from a variety of stakeholders on leveraging the power of citizen data. So I would like to invite the moderator of the session, Liliana Skudowski from Paris 1 to moderate the side event from now. Over to you, Liliana.
Thank you so much, Youngie. Thank you for this great introduction. So my name is Liliana Suchodolska. I work for Paris 21 Data Ecosystem team, and I'm really delighted to welcome everyone in this webinar where we will be presenting to you the foundations of the Copenhagen framework on citizen data. So we have a fantastic panel today with us, and I'm really thrilled to moderate these discussions. So before we open the panel, I think we will have a small introduction made to us by United Nations Statistical Division. So I'm really delighted to welcome Howie Chen from UNSD, who is leading the work on citizen data and household surveys. And she will guide you through what has been done to build the Copenhagen framework and where we stand with that as the collaborative on citizen data and what is the way forward. So Howie, over to you.
Thank you so much, Liliana. Thank you. It's a great pleasure for me to be here, for us to be here to speak about the exciting development on the Copenhagen framework. Let me see, where's my next slide? So before I get into the framework itself, just a little bit background, and you already talked a lot about what we've gone through, but just bring us back to Bangkok in November 2022. Why the framework? The Bangkok meeting was the first one that brought national offices and civil society organizations and academias together to discuss how do we leverage the power of citizen-generated data. And then we quickly realized that we actually didn't know, we don't have a common language, we don't know what we're talking about, and we're talking about different things. So one of the two recommendations out of Bangkok was to have the framework and to support and conceptualize and agree on different ways that citizens can play a role in data, and also to support an action point, formulating action points for the communities to move forward. So this is really to support us and talking about common languages or have a common understanding on what citizen data is, and then so we can work together and moving forward. Now, I'm not going to read out this, but the first meeting started in November 2022. This is about 14 months, and we're now here with the Copenhagen framework. How did it happen so quickly? Because of collaboration and partnership. Thanks to everybody who had worked on it, our steering committee member, the collaborative members, the experts, and from all communities. Thank you so much. So let me just introduce you to you the framework, the document, and there's a link at the bottom, and my colleague can also put the link on the chat so you can click. The document called Copenhagen Framework on Citizen Data has 4 parts. And the first one is the framework itself. We talk about the conceptual framework, the concepts and definitions, what's key for citizen data. The second part is the principle of citizen data, and third is enabling environment for us to really for citizen data to thrive sustainably. And last one is a roadmap for all of us to work together to implement the framework. So what is essence? So the document is pretty long. I think it's like 12, 15 pages. Citizen data we have in box 1, there's a what we call operational definition of citizen data. And the key aspects is there are three key, we call it defining characteristics. One of them is sufficient engagement of citizens. So citizens had to be sufficiently engaged in different stages of the data value chain. And it also depends on who initiates the data production, whether it's a state, government, or citizens themselves. So it's a complex one, but here I would like to illustrate the level of citizens. So what do we mean by sufficient and insufficient? So we borrowed the idea from urban planning in the 1950s. And really define, they call it ladders of citizen engagement, citizen participation. So here is the ladder from insufficient to sufficient with 5 levels. From information, we're just providing information to you, and to consultation, and to conciliatory, and then becoming sufficient as a partnership, being partners with citizens, and or even the last stage, the highest stage is self-determination of citizens and communities in the data process. So that ladder was adapted in the citizen data context and also modernized. So we have more explanations on what they mean for each of these levels of the citizen participation. And for some of those, we will need to further test them and really to see in the field, what does it mean by sufficient and insufficient citizen participation? The second part is the principle of the citizen data. We have at this moment 10 of them, and you might find some of them familiar because they were extracted and adapted from the existing data and statistical principles, including the fundamental principle for official statistics, including the principle for citizen science, and also take into consideration the human rights-based approach to data. So it's customized, tailored in the context of citizen data. An enabling environment, and we have put down 8 of them. Just a few examples. For example, in the SDG process from 2015 to 16, we see the SDG implementation takes a whole society approach. What about a whole society approach to data? Human capitals, capacity building, trust that has come out so often. How do we build trust? Make sure there's a trust environment between the state and the civil society organization and citizens. That is so crucial. And laws and regulations to protect, not only to protect citizen, the privacy and confidentiality of citizens that are and in the data, but also how about the statistical laws? Okay, are they open enough to accept non-state data producers? So we list all that, and then data quality that is fit for purpose. We need something that's rigorous yet very inclusive. The last point we talk about funding. By its nature of citizen data, they do not get funding from the government. So how do we make sure the support to civil society organizations, communities, and citizens on data are sustainable? The last chapter of the framework is the roadmap. So we would like to bring all partners together and the resources together, really to mobilize resources and partners to work together in implementing and testing and implementing the conceptual framework, the Copenhagen framework. So we would like all partners to join us, and there is an email address at the end you can use to reach out to us. I would like to really build case studies and test and pilot. So we prepare this conceptual framework in the 14 month, maybe 10 month, and we would like to spend the next year to continue really in the field to test to see whether it's applicable, whether the citizen data players see themselves in the framework, and organize consultations, and then we'll continue to refine the framework. Lastly is to implement the framework, right? So advocacy, raise awareness about this framework and also the work of a collaborative, and to get support from all partners and also to support all partners. And we would like to support a mapping exercise of citizen data to see what's the baseline, what's the landscape of citizen data. We're currently doing that in Kyrgyzstan with the support of Data for Now. What about a national? And also along the way, assess capacity building needs, and then the collaborative is tasked to provide guidance, produce technical guidance, and provide technical assistance. And we very much like at the end, really eventually to encourage similar collaboratives at the national level. So this is a global level initiative, and we do welcome all stakeholders, but it would be really, really great to see similar structures to be replicated at the national level. This is a roadmap. So now we're in March 2024, the commission. So the next year we will be in testing the framework and refining it. And we will have a meeting and the third expert group meeting in summer this year. And then March 2025, a year from now, we will have a further refined conceptual framework for the Statistical Commission. And then start implementation. Now, a couple words about the collaborative. As you already mentioned about its functioning, I really would like to thank all the members of the collaborative and the steering committee. This is a joint product of the collaborative. Thank you so much for tirelessly work together on this. And the framework is currently open for consultation. There's a link, I put it there. We'll also put in the chat. If you would like to work with us to test and pilot the framework, if you like to provide input to the framework, and there's also an email that you can reach us. We have another session on the side of the Statistical Commission that will be in person. There's a registration link on the 26th of February. If you're interested in follow our newsletters, also email citizendata@un.org. With that, I would like to hand it over to you, Liliana. Thank you so much for the opportunity.
Thank you so much, Howie, for highlighting this work of the collaborative. I think in less than 1 year and a half, the collaborative has come up with a huge early work and a very comprehensive document. So as you could see, there are guidelines, definitions, roadmaps, principles, enabling environment. So all that I think has to be considered in order to increase that understanding of what is citizen data among different practitioners and make it happen actually at the country level. So with this, I'm really, really excited to have to open this panel of experts who agreed to come today and discuss the importance of this framework for operationalizing citizen data at the country level, at the local level, and also globally. So we will have representatives of National Statistical Office, civil society, donors, and international organizations who will be presenting their views on the framework. So with this, let me turn to the first speakers. I'm really happy to have with us representatives of the Ghana Statistical Service. So we will have Professor Samuel Kobina Anim, who is a government statistician at the Ghana Statistical Service. He has been serving in this capacity since 2019. Samuel is a professor of economics, focusing on micro-development economics and applied microeconometrics at the Department of Economics, University of Cape Coast, Ghana. Samuel passionately supports national and global development agenda by providing professional service to the National Development Planning Commission, the National Statistical System in Ghana, and several international bodies. So Samuel is accompanied by his colleague Omar Saidu, who is currently acting head of social statistics and coordinator of data for SDGs in Ghana Statistical Service. Omar is a social statistician with over 23 years of experience in statistics production, with the responsibility of coordinating data for monitoring the SDGs in Ghana. Omar leads initiatives aiming at innovative data systems, multi-stakeholder approach to data production, and strengthening administrative data systems. Omar serves at several national and international platforms on data for development. So welcome, both of you. So my question to you today would be the following. So Ghana Statistics Service is known really for its pioneering ways to bring alternative data sources to official statistics. Could you maybe tell us a little bit why do you need the Copenhagen framework, how it serves the National Statistical Office? Over to you.
Thank you very much, Liliana. And to note that I would be speaking, I'm sure Professor
Omar, I think we lost you. Yeah.
that
Omar, could you maybe try switching off your camera because you're breaking up a bit? Okay, so as Omar is figuring out the connection issue, maybe in the meantime I will turn to the second speaker.
can you hear
Unless
me?
oh, great, Omar, we have you back. We can hear you well. Can you try now?
Okay, you can hear me. Good. Thank you so
Yes.
much. Yeah. So what I'm saying is the unique role of data and statistics in national development is something that has been already underscored, given the work that many development actors are doing. And for us in Ghana, the appreciation of the need to fill critical data gaps that will inform policies and programs is very important. And we understand that for us to achieve this, there is the need to leverage non-traditional data sources because we are at a point where we do recognize that our traditional data systems, specifically sample surveys and national censuses, are not adequate in providing the needed metrics to monitor development programs and also to feed into policies. In that context, if we have to leverage non-traditional data sources, we need to be guided by the fact that national statistical offices globally have been governed by frameworks such as the UN Fundamental Principles of Official Statistics, in our context in Africa, the African Charter of Statistics, which provide an important framework to guide how statistics and data are produced globally. Given Ghana's role in the interagency and expert group in SDGs, and the fact that going through the framework for monitoring the SDGs itself was a process that was very comprehensive and very engaging. This makes it very important and imperative that for the new data sources that we are identifying ourselves with, we need to have a framework to guide these new sources of data. And this is where we see that citizens' data and having a framework to guide the production of citizens' data is very important. The tenets, for instance, the tenets of data quality are ahead to build trusts in the use of these data. And so this should not be exclusively for traditional data. There should be a framework that will guide the production of non-traditional data as a way of building trust and providing a platform for the different actors to engage and bring the varied data that are produced across the National Statistical System together. And for that reason, we in Ghana Statistical Service have, over the past couple of years, implemented 5 different programs leveraging citizen science and citizen data. And our belief is that if we continuously improve from one to the other, we are able to bring the new data sources into the frame that help Ghana monitor the SDGs. And let me mention here that in 2021, Ghana happened to be the first country to use the UN Environment Program methodology on marine litter to monitor that particular SDG indicator 1411B. And proud to that, we had not been able to do so. And until then, we wouldn't have been able to monitor that particular indicator. And today, it is refreshing to note that even the Ghana Audit Service, as an institution with a mandate to audit public expenditure and public programs, has currently undertaken an audit of the performance on the prevention and reduction of solid waste into the ocean. And this is one area where they find it very useful to understand how this is done. And so for us, this coming into the official realm, it is important for us to leverage a framework like the Copenhagen framework to provide validity to what we are doing and to provide a kind of trust that people will need to have in using the data that we produce. Thank you, Liliana.
Thank you very much, Omar, for highlighting these key elements. I note down your multiple references to actually how this framework is going to engage different actors, build trust, and provide guidance to Statistics Office on the new sources of data. Thank you so much for highlighting that. So with this, I would like to turn to our second speaker, who is Mr. Samson Omondi, Assistant Director of Kenya National Commission on Human Rights. So Samson is coordinating the reporting of SDG 16.10.1 at the national level in Kenya and serving as liaison between the Kenya National Commission on Human Rights and the Kenya National Bureau of Statistics. Samson, really warm welcome. And from your point of view as a human rights practitioner, why do you think the Copenhagen framework is important?
Thank you very much, Liliana, and thank you, colleagues, for having me into this meeting today. And I think for me and for us in the human rights sector, the starting point is that national human rights institutions are both data producers, but also data consumers. And therefore, it's important that there's a framework in which the data that they consume and the data that they produce is brought into a system where it's considered for purposes of planning in the context of promotion and protection of human rights. So for us, that is a starting point. And if you look at the framework and the process that has gone into its development, a couple of things that I think are important to be pointed out. Number one is that the framework is very particular on leaving no one behind. So if you look at the principles of the principles that have been enumerated, the principles of accountability, non-discrimination, inclusivity, participation, accountability, these are principles that bring in the principles of data, but also it brings in the human rights principles. So in the context of when you apply all these principles and you bring in the non-traditional data contributors and data users, then you are able to use them for purposes of programming and purposes of promotion and protection of human rights. So we are going to look at data that is produced from both the national statistical offices as well as data that's produced from non-statistical users being used for purposes of promotion and protection of human rights. I think that is one. I think number two is that the framework is very particular on is the issue of building trust between state and non-state actors. I think one of the things we have seen over our work on coordinating work around 16.10.1 is that there's a lot of mistrust between state actors and non-state actors working on issues of data, because the state actors consider themselves as the experts and the non-state actors are not the experts. So I think one of the things the framework is championing for is that there needs to be a building of trust between the state and non-state actors, so that data that is produced from non-state actors can be used by the state, the data that is produced by non-state actors who are the NGOs, NGOs, civil society organization, faith-based organization. They produce a lot of data, but this data needs to get its way into the national framework for purposes of programming. I think number 3, which the framework is also very particular on, is the issue of looking at the citizens in its broad sense. That the framework expands, it looks at citizens as those that have traditionally been left behind. So it looks at refugees, it looks at migrants, it looks at those that are traditionally not there and are required for purposes of programming. And these are populations that their data is traditionally not collected. So if you collect their data and bring them into the national programming, again, you are expanding the issue of promotion and protection of human rights. I think number 4, the issue of inclusivity and strengthening accountability. That for better promotion and protection of human rights, there's need for inclusivity. And when you speak about inclusivity, it's about leaving no one behind. It's about bringing everyone on board. And I think from our experience on working on 1610.1, you get to notice that non-traditional data actors, civil society organizations, faith-based organizations, they produce a lot of data. But this is data that is not considered by the national statistical offices because it's not been included into the framework. And now what the Copenhagen framework is intending to do is that there's going to be inclusivity, that as you bridge the gap and as you have inclusivity, then we have this data again getting its way into filling the gaps that exist. And I think the last thing which is important for us from the framework is, if you look at the principles that have been enumerated, these are principles that blend so much on issues of human rights, issues that human rights actors act on a daily basis, and therefore there's a lot of blending in terms of the principles can quickly it can make meaning to human rights actors, which can translate it into work into national statistical offices, and then that data is being used for purposes of programming. And I think finally, the fact that we are able to get in all the data out there, because the national statistical offices ideally do not have the capacity. They are not able to fill in all the data gaps. And if we have a framework that is able to bring in all these data users, all the data producers, all the data consumers into one specific aspect, then we are really in a position to fill in the data gaps. And this, in the long run, for us in the human rights sector, that is useful for purposes of promotion and protection of human rights. And we think from our end that the framework really fits into this purpose. Thank you, Liliana.
Thank you very much, Samson, for highlighting your perspective. I think we all value a lot, I think, the lens that you're bringing, and thank you for highlighting the aspects that you think are of citizen data that are actually very important here, and of bringing these groups left behind into the radar of official statistics. We appreciate that very much. So let me move to the next speaker, and we are actually still staying in Kenya. So I'm happy to present to you Mrs. Florence Siebwo, the Executive Director of the SDGs Kenya Forum, which is an umbrella and coordination body of civil society actors in Kenya. Florence is a renewed civil society coalition builder, coordinator, and accompanier to ending poverty and inequalities in all its forms to prevent leaving no one behind. Welcome, Florence. So my question to you today would be, how does the SDGs Kenya Forum contribute to bringing people's voices to the data in Kenya? And what would be your advice to us to implement the roadmap of the framework? Over to you.
Thank you so much, Liliana, and it's great to be on this call. Thank you for this great invitation and a very, very good topic, very relevant topic, especially to those that are working across the data sector, but also championing sustainable development goals. As you've heard, my name is Florence Siebwo, and we've been working very closely with the National Bureau of Statistics here in Kenya and also other development partners in various engagements, ensuring that the conversation of statistics and data we don't leave out, especially civil society voices. And I like that I came after Samson. You already talked about some of the Kenyan priorities and how we've been looking at this landscape and how we've continued to showcase. For example, leaving no one behind is something that is very, very critical. And this is showcased even in some of our programs, like we are part of the Leave No One Behind Coalition. And we have continuously found spaces within communities on how communities can also be part and parcel of this particular process. And so thank you for the question. And it was also good to hear from Ghana because we, for example, in Kenya, one of the times when we were thinking about citizen-generated data and how that was working, we did a benchmarking in Ghana, and we implemented what Ghana had done from the National Statistical System. And so even Kenyan National Bureau of Statistics also replicated what Ghana was doing. And so it's always good to have these peer-to-peer learning calls, and we have been learning a lot and implementing at national level. And so just going into the framework, one of the things that we have really, really welcomed this particular framework is because it's anchored on the SDG Universal Pledge of leaving no one behind. And I know a lot of us have spoken about this, but this particular one, there's still space. We are 6 years to the 2030 target, and yet we are still leaving a lot of communities, as Samson and others have talked about, especially being in a country like Kenya. We know that disability, people with disability, marginalized communities, indigenous groups, grassroots women are still very marginalized in many communities. And how then do we ensure that their voices can count? And this framework is offering us that particular opportunity for us to collectively showcase that there are groups that have been left behind, and we can still work jointly. For civil society organization, as you all know, most of us civil society really struggled to ensure that our whatever we produce with our development partners, the donors, this can be recognized as official statistics. And for very many countries, this is still not a reality. And so we like that this particular framework is opening up that space, and also to do the peer-to-peer learnings, but also at local level for people to understand how this can be done. And so, as I said, like for Kenya, we learned from, for example, Ghana, and implemented it here in Kenya in 2021 when we launched the Kenya Quality Assurance Framework, which has the citizen-generated data guidelines. And that's how civil society, for example, was very central to champion what was happening in other countries. And the National Bureau of Statistics was happy to implement and to learn from others. So it's very critical for us, even as civil society organizations, to be peer-to-peer champions. Whatever that is happening in other countries, whatever that can be replicated at national level, this is something that as the forum and civil society organizations, we found space within the SDG framework and processes here in Kenya, where the government of Kenya relies a lot on what is happening through civil society and other stakeholders. And so we've been involved in that, ensuring that people can understand that there's much that is already been done. Let's not, it's better to replicate than to start sometimes some of these processes. And so again, we believe that as civil society organizations, there's this particular call with a successful collaboration and joint piloting of this particular framework, it could turn into a global guiding framework for governments, development partners, and all stakeholders around the globe on how to produce and use citizen data in development, monitoring, and public planning. Because I believe within when you look at the SDG processes, some of the gaps that are already existing could be answered by some of this, where all stakeholders come together and there's opportunity for all of us to contribute in different levels, but also understanding who does what. And so that mutual respect that was talked about, there are things that civil society can do. There are things that development partners, of course, are very central in. And there's, of course, the role of governments and those that champion some of these initiatives. And so, again, for us, we believe that the roadmap and also the citizen data framework should also, the adoption and application is very critical into the already existing processes. I know that most of you have heard about the Summit of the Future, the global processes that will happen, in the global future. processes, and it's important for us also to link some of these processes because with the framework now, what is it that can be linked to the global summit of the future processes? How do we ensure that issues of data and statistics are very key and central? How do we add voices of what is it that we are observing from an evidence-based perspective? And so this is also an opportunity for this when we're implementing, when we are going down to create awareness, bring on board allies who can implement at national level, advocate for implementation, advocate for, of course, the issue of funding, because with this great framework, there needs also to be a whole role of how then do we implement it, and that, of course, resonates with how do we get the right resources, be it human resource, but also the other kind of funding that is required, and also encouraging similar collaboratives, as I said before. So this is a very, very welcome to move, and I believe civil society organizations more and more are getting space, or new tools and products are being developed to ensure that we are not leaving behind even stakeholders, not just communities, but also stakeholders like civil society organizations. And so it's been important, or it's still important for funders and also national statistical systems, governments, to also understand and appreciate what other stakeholders are doing and what their role should be. So that's what I want to contribute for now. Thank you very much, Liliana.
Thank you so much, Florence, for this very rich testimonial of how much has been actually undertaken already by countries and by Kenya in particular. And I think that's a very good news that you are passing on, that despite all that work that has taken place in Kenya and is taking place globally, there's still actually a role for the framework to play, and that's very good. So with this, I would like to move to the next speaker, who is Mr. Solomon Olusogen. I'm sorry if I got it wrong. Who is the finalist of the Crowd for SDGs Innovation Cycle last year. And he's has contributed to the innovative Donate Water project, which is including citizen data in the area of SDG 13, climate change, and SDG 5, gender equality. So Solomon, as a graduating student of Bachelor of Science in Psychology at the University of Ibadan in Nigeria, is interested in research and learning more about humans and environment interactions. The Donate Water initiative has been successful in engaging a wide range of local and international stakeholders. So Solomon will be accompanied by Mrs. Elena Proden, who is 2030 Agenda Team Leader from UNITAR, one of the partner agencies having implemented Crowd for SDG project. UNITAR provided support to Solomon's Donate Water and other teams on statistical training. Elena represents UNITAR on the steering group of the Collaborative on Citizen Data, and she's also currently chairing a global network of institutions for statistical training. So welcome both to you. And over to you, Solomon. My question is actually from yours point of view, why this framework is important, and what will be your suggestion towards increasing the chances of its uptake? Over.
Thank you so much. I'm glad to be here. First, I must express my gratitude that this subject matter is now gaining attention at this global stage. The framework is important to me, to Donate Water, because we work with data, and not just data, we work with citizen data. Donate Water is addressing indicators under SDG 5, 6, and jointly 13. And Donate Water is involved in the production of citizen data using citizen science approach through crowdsourcing methods or methodologies, whatever you will. Our objectives currently aligns with 50% of the objectives of citizen data, and also as currently contained in the document that was shared about the framework, the Copenhagen framework on citizen data. And we also, in the past, we obviously started with a pilot test around March 2023 on citizen data, where we also were able to take feedback and input from citizens, volunteers, and the public community in Nigeria across several states and cities which give feedback into the pilot study that we conducted with several questions, research questions that we were asking around the SDG issues that we're addressing. And after we get the feedback, we also collaborated at that time with the UNITA in order to refine and sort of remake and reshape these research questions, and just to ensure that they sort of match the targeted SDG indicators that we wanted to address or we set out to address. And after it was quite an amazing exercise that turned out to be a great collaboration and a synergy of different skills and expertise and powerful initiatives from everyone, both the public, both the citizen data, the citizens themselves, and both we, the donate member team, and every other support and partners that were part of that session of that moment. We did our first crowdsourced data collection in October 2023. It was a first ever live citizen data collection publicly. Then we also did a second one around December 2023, where the public and youths across Nigeria, across several states and communities and villages, rural communities and in Nigeria were incentivized to produce data on water issues, gender inequalities, and also addressing psychological well-being of children and everyone else. We have plans currently, of course, I think I should mention here again that we have plans for another outreach, which is going to be the third one in February or March this year, 2024, for data, which is going to be produced with contributions again from citizens themselves, who are voluntarily contributing their time, their knowledge, their effort, going around and contributing data in order to drive change and also to make Nigeria and the world a better place as far as SDG global goals are concerned, for the 2030 and the 2050 global goals initiatives are concerned. The framework for us, again, means that the Nigerian NSO and the networks can now engage, because I think there's still part of this that is quite new in Nigeria. It's good to hear that the Ghana and the Ghana team are really making, they're taking the forefront, and we're actually looking up to them, I really must say. And for us now, it means that we also can take this, we can approach and we can engage in Nigeria NSO in order to say, okay, the work that you guys have been doing through the traditional methodologies and the work we are also currently doing, we can sort of have a synergy around this thing, around this best of both worlds, just for us to have to achieve a collective good, of course. And to answer the second question about suggestions towards increasing the chances of the framework uptake, I just want to share about, I think, around 4 points, basically. First is I think it's important to share guidelines on building capacity around data needs for national government, agencies, and every other stakeholders, both locally and countrywide and globally. And I think number two, it's important to use social organizations as vehicles in order to drive this and establish inclusiveness, and I think that way we'll be increasing the value of the Copenhagen framework. And that's just like currency, because everyone would literally kill for currency because of the value that is attached to it. And also number three, I think the current thing that I sense is skepticism around quality and objectivity of citizen data. And so if that's the case, then I think we can advocate for rules of engagement or best practices that everyone or all potential stakeholders can use, jointly, collectively, or individually, and that way we can all sort of understand the roadmap and understand how we're supposed to engage one another. And that's just like traffic signs and traffic rules, because we all have common understanding of traffic rules. It enables smooth journey on our roads, of course. And lastly, I think it's important to also incentivize stakeholders and all state actors and non-state actors to adopt the framework. I think this will help us to drive this adoption. And of course, from the perspective of the NSO Commission, that is also enabling citizen empowerment. Thank you so much for this opportunity once again.
Thank you very much, Solomon. What a great testimonial, and thank you also for highlighting the role of peer learning. I think if Ghana is still with us, they should feel proud, because so many countries have been actually taking their example. So that's really great to hear. Thank you for that. Elena, over to you.
Thank you very much. So I would just like to say, based on the example provided by Solomon, we've been supporting with the University of Geneva and several other universities under this Crowd for SDG project, a number of grassroots initiatives similar to the one, outlined by Solomon, Rachel, and there is a whole team, in fact, that we're leading this work. With a focus on access to data in Nigerian communities. And there were other similar teams, and we saw how much enthusiasm there is, in particular among young people, to work on data innovation, to contribute to better evidence to inform policies that are needed for their communities. So this is really great. And I think if you look at the framework, that would be really at the highest level, self-determined initiatives, so I think it's a great example. And it's also, I think, re-emphasizing again this principle of participation that already exists in the human rights-based approach. But we also emphasize it in this conceptual framework. It's really important. It really gives agency, in fact, and highlights not only individual but collective action. And from our perspective, as we were doing mostly capacity building, this framework is a great tool to be now doing capacity building in a more informed manner. We have a reference document, and to be doing it not only for citizen science and civil society organizations, but also national statistical offices to help spread it. And I think it's also that these communities often speak different languages. So the framework will provide this great common denominator for them to understand better each other. I think that's really important. And finally, I would like to say that to promote this framework, I guess we would also now need to have a bit of a better or like deeper analysis than in terms of the specific capacity needs of different stakeholders. Even within the same organization, you would have different needs. For some, it will be more awareness. For others, it will be specific skills, and yet others, it would be really performance-based related outcomes, and so I would just like to thank also all the partners with whom we've been working on this together within the Crowd for SDG project. That was our first really deep dive into citizen data, but also all the partners on the collaborative on citizen data, the steering committee, and all the others who have contributed to producing such a great document.
Thank you so much, Elena. That was very useful, and thank you for this framing and highlighting various capacity development needs. I think that's very important, and kudos again for your project on water. I think a great example of collaboration. So as we are talking about capacity building and capacity needs, it's my pleasure to welcome Mr. Christopher Maloney from Hewlett Foundation. So Christopher is a program officer at William and Flora Hewlett Foundation in California. As part of the Gender Equity and Governance Program, he oversees a grant-making portfolio focused on evidence-informed policymaking in East and West Africa. He has a specific line of effort on the data revolution. Hi, Chris. I have two questions for you today. So one, it's because you are a donor, and the second one is to help you wake up because that's very early morning for you. So the first question is, you're representing the donor community. So could you tell us briefly why the Hewlett Foundation supports initiatives of citizen data? Over to you.
Great. Thanks so much, Liliana, and good morning from a very cold and foggy San Francisco, but I'm very honored and humbled to be a part of this distinguished panel. So as Liliana mentioned, I'm Chris Maloney, part of the Hewlett Foundation's Gender Equity or what we call GEG program, which is a multi-pronged $100 million per year program supporting a diverse set of creative thinkers and problem solvers who are working to build an inclusive society where everyone, especially women and girls, can thrive. And one of those prongs within our program is what we call evidence-informed policymaking, or EIP, and that's specifically where I sit. And this work is focused on East and West Africa, where our goal has been to encourage policymakers across the region to incorporate evidence into their decision-making and enhance people's well-being through more rigorous and objective policymaking, and thereby also strengthening trust between policymakers, citizen, and policymaking process. And this is where, I think very importantly, citizen-generated data has a crucial role to play. First, and as many as my colleagues here have mentioned, if we're to get back on track towards Agenda 2030 and at least trying to meet the SDGs, we just need more and better data. And the data gaps are very daunting, especially in Africa, where we focused our work. And we know that citizen-generated data offers a way to fill these gaps and in ways that are both feasible and timely. But secondly, beyond just filling critical data gaps, we also know that citizen-generated data has a very powerful knock-on effect. It helps address systemic challenges around inclusivity, visibility, and trust in the data space and policymaking process. Because ultimately, when leveraged efficiently and effectively, citizen-generated data can help ensure people are truly seen by their policymakers when done right. And this last point on when done right is really important, because this last piece is key, because citizen-generated data can also be done wrong, and we want to help make sure that that does not happen. People can still be excluded, even when their data is available and seen, if, for whatever reason, policymakers choose not to use that data or ignore it or worse, abuse it. Hence, advocacy around its use is just as needed together with sound data governance and safe practice in its production. And we're seeing this play out live. In just the past month, I've engaged with grantees working to bring citizen-generated to bear on a huge range of very important but very sensitive issues, such as who is included in digital ID in Kenya, understanding the access to service issues impacting sexual minorities in Uganda, or addressing farmer-herder disputes in Burkina Faso. This stuff is hard. It's even difficult to talk about at times, but that's precisely why we need to work on it. And if we don't, as one of my colleagues says earlier, the principles of leave no one behind will just be meaningless words on page. Additionally, I wanted to note two things. I think defining this space is very, very hard. I personally take a very expansive view of what is citizen-generated data. Mobile network operator data, open finance data, personal drone data, for example, are all citizen-generated and I think have huge potential in improving evidence-informed policymaking. Others do not take such an expansive definition, and I think that's okay, but we do need to make sure that we're clear on what we're all talking about so that we can bound this problem set and together chart the way forward. I think it also means we need to break down silos across two very different worlds, as many of my colleagues today have alluded to. National statistical offices and governments on one side, and the advocacy of civil society community on the other, and then the myriad cultural, sectoral, and capacity intersectional differences. It's a little scary, but it's exciting, especially with so many technical advances in this space that just did not exist even 5-10 years ago. And so as a result, at Hewlett, we see tremendous potential with citizen-generated data, and we're really excited to help empower those who are defining and shaping this space. So thank you for letting me make those remarks, Liliana.
Thank you so much, Chris, and thank you actually for highlighting the richness of citizen data. I think that's very useful, and also making sure we are aware of the risks. With this, I would like to thank the panelists for their experience, for sharing the experience with us, and also for testimonials and why they think that the Copenhagen framework is important. So I would like to invite now all the participants and attendees that we have today with us to actually raise their hands and unmute themselves if they would like to ask the questions to the panelists. And you can also ask the questions here in the chat. Please feel free to do that. And in the meantime, I would like to ask a question to all participants, and whoever is ready, please feel free to unmute yourself. So what opportunities of the framework implementation do you see this year in your context, in your country, in your programming? And if you could highlight maybe some examples, that will be also very useful for our attendees today to understand how the framework can be useful in guiding that. Who would like to go first? If there are no volunteers, maybe let me ask the question from one of the audience member. So Daksha Vaja is asking it's a question for Chris. In case of gender access to energy in piece of technologies available, in terms of access and sales is a tough job. We have success stories, but replication is difficult due to several reasons. What would be your recommendations to ease that in relation to citizen data? I hope I got it right, Daksha, but please feel free to formulate a question. Just unmute yourself.
So I think it's actually a not to punt the question, but probably a better question for my colleagues on the CSO and policymaker side. But I think one thing that I think, just sort of stepping back, if I look at a question like this, is the object of the data. So if we are generating data or success stories or different types of data around a particular issue, for example, in this case, gender access to energy, who is the policymaker or policymakers that you're trying to target that story to through that data? How are you trying to tell that story with that data? And what particular process can you inform? So I think, oftentimes we sort of see amazing initiatives that are out there, but they're not linked to anything specifically that has a clear change pathway to policy change or a policymaker who has the power to make change. So that I think would be the key thing to think about, what that looks like in specific contexts, particularly, for example, in the gender access to energy space there. I'd have to defer to colleagues who are closer to it than me, but that's something that sort of jumps off the top of my head.
Thanks so much, Chris. If anyone would like to complement that, please feel free. Otherwise, let me turn now to the question from the audience. So, Mary Shawa, would you like to ask your question? Please go ahead.
I wouldn't want to ask a question, but just to say a few things. Number one, for Malawi, the framework has come at the right time because we already signed an MOU with the National Statistics Office. And the Malawi National Statistics Office has accepted that a lot of data being collected by civil society organizations is not seeing its way into the national data set. So we are at a point when we want to develop a guideline and a toolkit in terms of how to collect that data and how to deposit it and where to deposit it. So the framework will be used for Malawi as a stepping stone for us to test its usability and then be able to give lessons in terms of how good it is. And I think using that trial, we'll be in a position to answer the question being raised. Because if you are really collecting citizen-generated data, the gender issues come in automatically. The energy issues come in automatically. The voices of the voiceless will be saying energy is our challenge. We propose 1, 2, 3. Or water is a challenge. We want 1, 2, 3. And they can state anything. For example, we did our first trial on the program, which is ongoing, the social cash transfer. We asked people, how do you see the program? We also did with the agriculture input subsidy. The outcome is overwhelming because they were able to say, even if this program is running, we are not benefiting. We are spending a lot of time looking for inputs. We are spending a lot of time skewing up. We spend weeks before we get the inputs. By the time we reach where we should get the inputs, instead of getting it at this price, we get it at double the price. So already they are bringing out the gender issues. And one good gender issue was that we are being sexually abused. We are being asked to give our sex in order to get a service. Or we are told you cannot get this because you already got it, yet we didn't get. So citizen-generated data will push the SDGs a mile from where it is now. If it is properly packaged, properly collected, properly shared, and it forms part of the national data set. I thought I could add this one in response to that question, but also sharing experience. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mary, and congratulations on your MOU with the Statistics Office. That's really good. Would you like to maybe just introduce your organization? I think that would be useful for those who don't know you.
Thank you very much. I work for Plan International Malawi. our consortium has a number of about 10 organizations that have formed the consortium, and it's this consortium that has done that work. Thank you. And the plan chairs the consortium.
Excellent. Thank you so much. I see there are two participants who would like to ask questions, but I don't know, Samson, would you like to reply to the recent question, or you have a comment?
Yeah.
Please go ahead.
Thank you, Liliana. I think mine first is to congratulate Mary for the signing of the MOU between the institution and the National Statistical Office of Malawi. I think it's a very good step. And one of the things we are encouraging, I think the Kenya National Commission on Human Rights, being one of the pioneer national human rights in the world, signed an MOU with the National Statistical Office is to try as much as possible so that many institutions can have MOUs with national statistical offices, because through that, then they are able to bring in their data into the national indicator framework. But I think the second thing is to ensure that as institutions sign this, they don't block others, because there needs to be really, we need to ensure that as we try to be inclusive, we are also not exclusive to others, because you'll find that there are some national statistical offices which will say we are only picking data from institutions that we have MOUs with. So you'll find that in the process, there are those that are likely to be left behind. For me, it's just a thin line of ensuring that as we sign the MOUs, as we bring everyone on board, let us also not exclude others. But great congratulations to Mary on their signing of the MOU. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Solomon, for this guidance. So the second person I would like to call upon is Clay. Would you like to ask a question?
Yes, thank you so much. I greatly appreciate it. My name is Clayton Lewis Ferrara. I'm based out of Orlando, Florida. I'm CEO of a nonprofit called Ideas for Us. We're an environmental action organization, and we do work in almost 40 different countries, including the United States. I have a question. We're a smaller nonprofit, and data collection is tremendously important to us and our partners on the ground in many of the places that we work. We're a small team, but we're a mighty team. And I'm always looking for ways in which we can plug in with existing data sets, especially existing data sets around citizen science. But it's often very hard to find who are the actors on the ground that have been collecting data historically so that we can meld our data sets with theirs. I was wondering if your participants today have any recommendations on how small NGOs can plug into larger data sets for grassroots work on the ground. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Clay. Is there anyone who would like to answer that question?
Yes, Liliana, if I could.
Please, Florence, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. And from Kenya, the SDG Kenya Forum, with our members who are within our membership, we have a whole data group, organizations that focus on issues of data. And so just to respond to your question is that one of the things that we have done here in Kenya, as I said before, of course, with now a proper having proper guidelines through the Kenya Quality Insurance Framework for the National Bureau of Statistics. Then now we've had the opportunity to be able to take this, cascade this downwards in terms of building capacity of civil society organizations, smaller organizations that could not maybe have an opportunity or would not even know where to start with this kind of conversations. Working with them, we've done that with a lot of partners on this call, like Paris 21, International Civil Society Center, Hewlett Foundation, and many others. Now, sort of just building their capacity and also involving them in different processes, and also sort of providing platforms, what Samson was saying, between the NSO, the National Statistical System, and organizations that are very, very small. And then through that, you're able to have the trust building. Through that, you're able to come up with joint initiatives that even small organizations or grassroots organizations, for us we call them community-based organizations, are able to confidently take up some of these initiatives. We have very, very good storylines or good initiatives that have been done by organizations, and you can look at some of our members, including Roots Kenya, Open Institute, development initiatives, and many others. You'll find that they are very, very granular kind of stories of community-based or very local organizations, or a way to collect data from a very local perspective and link that to national processes, and then link that to different platforms. And so what has helped us in this is when you collaborate and work closely with the Bureau of Statistics. And so for us, again, like Malawi, we've had these conversations of having the guidelines in place and also having an MOU that also now opens up to as many organizations, not just the national organizations, but understanding that we need to have community-based organizations, especially because they're the ones who are in touch with local realities, and they have a lot of stories that we do not have access to. And so this for us is always very, very important because of the issues of leaving no one behind. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Florence. I see Omar would like to also come in. Please, Omar, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you very much, Liliana. And I see a lot of requests for national statistical offices to step up and work collaboratively. So just to share some thoughts of why it is important for us to do so in the light of this framework. First and foremost, we need to appreciate the context for which this framework was developed. It's definitely developed and is born out of a need, an urgent need that is based on the fact that the population of the world need actions that respond to their needs and safeguard their welfare and well-being. And it is obvious our traditional data systems, especially in the global south, are not adequate to respond to this need. Several efforts by many, including some of our colleagues on this call, CSOs and other private sector entities, have responded with different sources of data and are achieving results for the people. And this is exactly what the national statistical offices or systems exist for. So the framework provides an avenue for the national statistical systems in our countries to ensure we leverage all avenues to rise up to the call for action for our people, for our environment, for our economy, for the security. And so I see that if citizens' data will provide a quick, less resource intensive, inclusive data, as Chris mentioned, and rather well-focused means to meet the need for decision-making and policy expectations. Yes, we need to embrace it. And this, for me, should be our singular motivation if none else exists. So in that context, I think national statistical offices will need to look beyond our traditional systems and see how we can support this cause. Thank you, Liliana.
Thank you so much, Omar. Thank you for that. I think that's a really ambitious vision, and we really commend you for highlighting that. I see a second speaker, second participant, sorry, who would like to come in. Altax, would you like to present yourself and ask a question or comment?
Hi, I hope you can hear me.
Yes.
We're very excited at the Open Institute and some of our partners about this framework, for the simple reason that it provides a structure for even the smallest organizations who are collecting data to actually have a means to share it with the rest of the world with a certain structure, with a certain standard. Last year, for example, we had 30 community-based organizations working together to map out data on health and education across Kilifi County, which is one of our states, for those of you who are not in Kenya. And what they did is that they were able to surface not only data on issues like maternal health and stuff like that, but they were surfacing information that normally you would not get, such as how easy it is to get to some of the very remote health facilities and so on. And when we shared this data with some of the colleagues who have been working within the space, and also with the government, when we shared the data with them, they realized that they have a lot of data, but they have never really considered to collect data on the ease of getting to a place, to a medical facility at different times of the year. So these organizations are actively collecting that same data every month, so to speak, to find out how easy is it to get to a health center that is remote during the different seasons, so that then by the end of the year they will have some kind of data that will be useful to the government and that will guide the government action. So this framework for us is a useful tool in that it provides certain guidelines, certain means of thought that can be very useful, not just for national and regional initiatives, but also for subnational players who are doing things just for their own community's use, because it helps them to understand the issues of standards. It helps them to understand that they do not operate in a vacuum. And so this is a great initiative, and that is why we support it. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Al Gax. So let me just introduce Al. Al is heading the Open Institute in Kenya. Thank you for your testimonial, very useful. And I would like to ask the question now from the chat by Rachel David. How do we promote adoption of citizen science projects in the grassroots? Is there anyone who would like to answer that question, maybe from the civil society primarily?
Liliana, could you say that again? Just repeat that.
Yes. So how should we promote the adoption of citizen science projects in the grassroots?
Maybe I could just try, and then somebody else also can just give our example again. Sorry, thank you. So of course it's very important, but we understand that many times when you start projects at a grassroots level, a community level, you need to, of course, start off by really building capacity and coming up with informal or sort of formal structures that can achieve the purpose that you want. And so in our own, for example, our own experience, one of the things that we have engaged in is community SDG dialogues, whereby we bring together local communities on the Live No and Behind and start conversations on what is it that people are going through. Not just saying that we are coming here to talk about SDGs. Many times it starts off as conversation where we ask communities, what is it that you're going through? What are your challenges? What are the prospects of this particular subnational county, and then getting that and linking that to the SDGs, but also to some of the data needs that these communities have. And as Al said, and many others, this again brings the opportunity for us to now build capacity for local citizens to understand or to be part and parcel of some of these great initiatives. Some of our members, again, have used like local radio stations. We call them vernacular stations, where they sometimes they call in and people just very simple ways of collecting data from citizen. I know it's many times it's qualitative data, but it's very useful because it gives citizen perceptions, and then citizen can also feel that they're also their voices. They're given a platform to have a voice, and then later on we sort of bring this to national processes like the voluntary national reviews, ensuring that we're not just talking from a very abstract perspective at national level as governments or civil society development partners, but also we can showcase how Kenyan VNR, for example, can have citizen voices or perceptions, either under Leave No One Behind or indigenous groups, something that we've been working with, for example, the Danish Institute and the UN STAT and many others. So then how do we continuously find innovative ways? I think it's a continuous call of how to find innovation, how to ensure that communities feel included in these processes, and how we can capitalize on communities that are already organized, or we can find ways of also organizing them. And again, this many times some of the challenges are these processes are not continuous. How do we have projects or interventions that are continuous for us to ensure citizens can always be at the forefront of these interventions? Thank you.
Thank you so much, Florence. And maybe let me just complement that great recommendation also with the fact that I think that's also the ambition of the framework, of the Copenhagen framework, to raise advocacy among state and non-state actors. And there are many civil society representatives who are part of the collaborative, and I think it will be their very ambitious role and also objective to make sure this the framework is also known to their partners on the ground at the local level. I see, Rachel, you were asking this question. I see you have your hand raised. How has this been answered? How do you feel about this?
Hi, thank you so much for the answer, Florence and Liliana. So I just want to add to it. I am from Nigeria, from the Donate Water team. So we've actually had experience about this issue by approaching the people from the grassroots. So most of these people actually have expectations from this citizen science project. So they have expectations that once they participate in contributing to citizen science projects, they want actually to see changes or for you to bring something or like kind of development or solution to that problem that they are trying, that they will be contributing to. So in this case, in the case where they don't get to see those changes after they've actually contributed to some level, they would actually want to draw back or begin to ask questions about, okay, we have actually contributed to this citizen science project for a while. We haven't seen any solutions or any solutions to this their problem. So this would actually cause some kind of drawback from the citizens and some questioning. So that is why I'm actually trying to like asking, how do we actually really promote it and to make them encourage people to the grassroots to take part more in citizen science projects. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Rachel, for that. We really appreciate your question and your testimonial. I'm afraid we are running out of time, and I see there are many hands up. So please continue to ask your questions in the chat. We will be hoping to answer them in the chat as well. And in the meantime, it's my pleasure to actually pass the mic to my colleague Ravi Kumar from the World Bank. Ravi is the World Bank Development Data Group. It's representing the World Bank Data Group in Washington. He and his team are responsible for conceptualizing and managing the delivery of a range of activities to build capacity for data literacy and data use, enable data-driven decision-making, improve public services, and democratize participation in the data revolution across low and middle-income countries. Ravi, you have been with us throughout all the time. You have heard the very nice testimonials and questions from the audience. So you will agree with me that this is raising lots of interest, and there is a high, I think, bar put for the framework. So I pass the mic to you to provide us with the closing remarks. Over to you, and thank you so much to all panelists and all participants for your discussions.
Well, thank you, Liliana, and good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone. As Liliana said, this is quite a bit of excitement and great to see an amazing turnout and very rich discussion. Once again, I'm Ravi Kumar with the Development Data Group of the World Bank in Washington, D.C., and it is an honor to be here at this very important and exciting event. I think the ideas and discussions we had today will make the Copenhagen framework on citizen data much stronger. And ultimately, we all hope will have a greater impact. Now, we heard from Young May in her opening remarks at the very beginning of this event that the world had so much to do to accelerate progress towards the SDGs. And the last few years of overlapping crises, from the pandemic to conflicts, to the increasing impact of climate change, have increased the challenges. Governments and citizens, they need all the data they can to help them prioritize investments, respond to emergencies, and improve the well-being of everyone, including the most vulnerable. The World Bank has made boosting capacity for data production and data use a high priority. Some of you might know that, in fact, in 2021, the World Development Report, Data for Better Lives, focused on this very particular question, on how to leverage data from the entire data landscape, including citizen data, the topic of our discussion today, in the context of social contract for data that protects the privacy and rights of all stakeholders and advances development priorities. So in this context, I'm very delighted that our colleagues and Howie have launched the data framework on citizen data. And, I'm honored to be part of the collaborative among so many of our colleagues. And it's great to see the comments and the responses from a diverse group of friends and partners here. I'm also grateful to hear from our speakers today. The speakers we have heard from today given great illustrations of how the framework can work in practice. For example, we heard from Omar that the citizen data framework would help bridge data gaps, engage diverse group of actors, and further strengthen trust in data ecosystem. Samson emphasized how this framework would enable state actors to use data generated by non-state actors for inclusive development, which is a critical thing. I also appreciated hearing from Florence, who reminded us that we are just 6 years away from 2030, and many voices are yet to be counted to advance the SDGs, and how this citizen-generated data framework will support that. Finally, our few more speakers, including Solomon and Elena, talked about the need for capacity building and the grassroots initiatives, in particular among young people who can work on data innovations, and how this framework would support experimentation and innovation, which I think is critical. And finally, from Chris, we heard about how this framework would support evidence-based policymaking in a range of countries and communities, and also accelerate inclusive development. I also agree with Chris that there are potential risks of citizen-generated data, and we ought to have robust mechanism to manage those risks and build capacity accordingly. I believe once we have a conceptual framework in place to help us better understand the full potential of citizen contributions to the data value chain, the question is how to implement it, and how we talked about it a bit. Also, what can governments do in collaboration with development partners, like the World Bank, the UN, and like the one Chris represents and others, to help ensure that citizen data initiatives can emerge and thrive within the national data ecosystem. So if I may, as a way to conclude today's discussion, I'll just like to highlight a few areas going forward that can potentially facilitate the implementation of Copenhagen framework on citizen data. First is this data governance framework. Governments need to look at the laws and regulations on the books and ensure that people's rights to access, collect, use, and reuse data, and to be part of the national policy dialogue are in place. The mechanisms are robust and well enforced. When these frameworks are in place as part of a national data strategy based on openness and inclusivity, it's possible to see how individual citizen data initiatives, like the one, for example, Elena talked about, which may not be potentially at times comprehensive in terms of coverage, but would very well fit into bigger picture, like a missing puzzle pieces to support policy and decision-making and evaluation and monitoring of programs. Also, fundings and incentives are critical. We heard today about the need for funding and capacity building for civil society to help fill in data gaps where needed. And in terms of incentives, governments need to make sure that citizens and CSOs see that devoting considerable time and energy to data will have an impact. This means that civil society needs to have a voice at the table in broader discussions about the data ecosystem. And I very much believe Copenhagen framework on citizen data will play an instrumental role in creating that enabling environment. With that, thank you all for being part of this rich discussion today and for all you do to help maximize the potential of data for development. Thank you very much.
Thank you to all participants for this engaging discussion, and hope to engage with you further. We have shared the email of the collaborative in the chat. Please feel free to ask questions, to send us your examples of citizen data from your countries, and we hope to engage with you in that framework as we go forward. Thank you so much, and have a lovely day, rest of the day.